Hey guys, how's it going? Hope you're doing well. My name is Crown, and today I'm going to read you some very interesting stories that I hope that you're gonna love. And now, without further ado, let's go! This story includes me and my wife. The setup. As you may know from previous posts, my wife and I are pastors. At the time, we were in a very urban setting. You have to know at the outset that my wife is one of those people that everyone loves. She's a sweetheart and she doesn't like confrontation, so she often agrees to things she doesn't really want to do just to avoid it. She leaves those moments for me. Example. I once got kicked out of a church pre-pastoring days, where the pastor said my wife was more than welcome to stay, but I had to go. In our 25 years of marriage, I've seen her get angry like this twice. This was the first. The cast, the entitled mom, my wife, and me. So one December evening around 8 p.m. I was returning from our normal fundraising activity that we do every year. I approached the front door of the church only to have the entitled mother come running up to me. She lived across the street and must have been lying in wait for my return. "Pastor, your wife kicked me out of the building." "Wait, whose wife?" "Your wife." "My wife? Mrs. Me?" "Yes." "My wife? Puerto Rican lady about yay tall? Pretty and wearing a similar uniform to my own?" "Yes." "My wife kicked you out?" "Yes." "Are you absolutely sure it was my wife?" "Well, yes." "Oh, you messed up." "You don't even know what happened." I don't know and I don't care. All I need to know is that somehow you got the one woman on the planet who wouldn't fight or argue at all to not only be angry with you, but to kick you out? You messed up." The entitled mother was known to be loud, aggressive, and a bully to get her way. "You need to go talk to her." "Listen up. What do you think is going to happen here? You think I'm just going to go in there and give my wife a dressing down just because you said so? Not going to happen. As I've already stated, if she got angry enough to kick you out, you messed up. And even if she was wrong, which I would bet every dollar I've got that she wasn't, she is my wife. I go home with her. I live with her. We have kids together and have been married for 20 years. You think I'm taking your side here? That's going to be a hard no. Have a nice evening." And with that, I walked into the church. No sooner than I get in, my wife comes running up to me, and as soon as she starts, I hold up my hand. I know what happened. The entitled mother just came and ranted about it. Just hold on 1 second, please. I need to go see this for myself because I'm still having a hard time believing it. That was it. I went to the security cameras and rewind to that point, and sure enough, there she was going off on the entitled mother. Made my entire week. I gave her a kiss and said, "Good for you." And that was that. The entitled mother was angry about some nonsense like her child deserving something in a church. Like I said earlier, I didn't care to find out. The entitled mother gave us a silent treatment for a couple of months until she wanted something else. In the 4 years we pastored there, she never learned that giving us a silent treatment wasn't a punishment, but rather a well-deserved reward. At the sandwich shop that I worked at many years ago, we had a young man I'll call Jason, 18-ish, who was a known thief/vagrant in the area. He came into our sandwich shop many times and stole bottled sodas out of our cooler, chips off of our rack, and would dash out the door. And twice we caught him in person and on camera stealing our tip jar. We actually had to train our employees at that location to only leave a single dollar bill in the tip jar because it got stolen so often. We had Jason's picture in the back with a notice to employees not to serve him. One day, Jason came in and put 6 chocolate milks in his backpack before my coworker could come out from the kitchen. He pretended to order a sandwich to get her to go to the end of the counter and start cutting the bread. He then wandered over to where the cookie display was and grabbed a handful of cash out of the tip jar and dashed out of the store. She had forgotten to empty the tip jar and there was easily $30+ in there that day. Because I knew his name and we had seen him in the area so often, I called the police and said that I wanted to legally trespass him from our store. Even the police knew who he was. A few days later, they brought in a signed trespass notice and told me that he had been informed that he's not allowed to set foot in our store for a whole year. If he enters our store again, they told us to call them and they could legally arrest him. We would always have the security footage to prove that he had broken the trespass order. About a month later, I was working the store solo when in walks Jason and an older man. I looked Jason in the eyes and told him, "You're not supposed to be in here." I asked him to leave. The old man says, "It's okay. I'm his father." For a second, I'm thinking his father is bringing him in to apologize and pay back all the stolen stuff. Boy, was I wrong. Sir, Jason is legally trespassed from the store. He has stolen hundreds of dollars worth of products from us, including our tip jars. We have him on camera. He's legally not allowed to be in this building. It's okay, I'm his father. He's not gonna steal anything with me here. Sir, he needs to leave now or I'm going to call the police. Can't you make an exception? Only if he pays back for every item he's stolen and apologizes. Then maybe I'll consider not calling the police on him. Come on, he can't do that. He's broke. I'm buying him lunch as a treat today. Either he pays or leaves. I'm calling the cops to let them know he violated his trespass. Why can't he just order some food? I'm his father. I'll make sure he doesn't steal anything, I promise. I just turn and grab my phone and start dialing the number of the local police department. The entitled dad grumbles loudly and left. Dragging Jason was him. I told the cops Jason was here again. An officer came by later for the security footage and he just shook his head at the stupidity of Jason and his fatherly escort. A few days later, another cop stopped by to say Jason had been arrested and charged with trespassing. But unless we wanted to press charges for all the theft, he wasn't going to be in jail for long. We decided not to prosecute, but we did get a 5-year extension on our trespass ban for Jason. Sadly, it wasn't the last time I saw him either. The kid never learned. This encounter happened about 7 months ago. And note that the kid in this story is the embarrassed kid, and the old gentleman is a 60-some-year-old guy. The kid was very polite and sorry, so this story isn't about him. Also, I'm translating this into English, so bear with me. A little backstory. About a year ago, I was diagnosed with cancer of the nasal cavity, stage 2. The tumor was quite large, but thankfully benign. Edit, people have pointed out that I formulated this wrong. By benign, I wanted to shorten the fact, but it still did not spread into other tissue. Thus, it was still contained, which is what I thought the word meant. I apologize for my gaps in knowledge. To get it removed, I first had to undergo aggressive chemotherapy to make it smaller. Thanks to the chemo, I had severe alopecia, hair loss, which made most of my hair and even eyebrows and eyelashes fall out. At some point, I had to go bald, but I wore a wig, because I didn't want to look like a skinhead/neo-Nazi. I'm 6'4" and pretty muscular, so I thought people would assume. So once, after a long chemo session in the hospital, I took the bus home. There is only one bus that goes from the hospital to where I live, so I took that one only to see it was absolutely packed. I felt really bad thanks to the chemo, so I asked a middle-aged dude to let me sit. He was very understanding and gave me his spot without complaining. If you're reading this, thanks bro. 2 stops later, enter the entitled mother. A lovely whale was in. I demand a parlay with a CEO haircut and a 12-some-year-old kid. It took her roughly 5 seconds to see the bus was packed, start looking for a free seat, spot me, and start marching, or in her case, trying to fit in the aisle between the seats while shoving others aside to me. When I saw her, I knew I was screwed. She then stood next to me and decided to talk to me. This is the conversation that followed. Hey, could you let my kid sit down? You mean me? Who else? Oh, I'm sorry, but I'm on my way from the hospital and, She cuts me off and says, so are we? Nonsense, the stop was a few kilometers away from the hospital. My boy just broke his leg and we're coming straight from the ER. Her kid was standing next to her without any support, clearly embarrassed. He's standing next to you completely fine. Look here, bot. I'm 21, by the way. My kid deserves to sit down. Look, madam. I'm sorry, but I just got back from a chemo session in the hospital and I need to sit down and rest. I then moved my wig a bit to let her see my bald head. The entitled mother then straight up started yelling in my face. Stop making excuses and get off the effing seat, you skinhead piece of trash. At this point, I was baffled. I didn't know what to say. The kid was trying to make his mother stop and we had the attention of the whole bus. She then grabbed me and tried to yank me from my seat. I held on tight and thankfully did not fall off. Now enter the old gentleman, my savior. The old gentleman says, Will you shut up, you dumb cow? Who do you think you're talking to? Stop assaulting other passengers or I will be forced to step in. Also, every dumb moron could see that the dude has cancer. No, he's just a skinhead. He's got no eyebrows, you witch. Seems like that really offended the entitled mother because she spun around on the spot and threw a falcon punch in the old gentleman's face. I was shocked and in disbelief. The whole bus was flabbergasted, and the kid probably wished he'd never been born. The old gentleman then said something unbelievable and the golden sweet karma moment followed. Okay, that does it. Harassing passengers on a bus, physical assault against a passenger, and now assaulting an officer? You're in deep trouble, lady. The old gentleman then pulled out a badge and told her to stay where she was. And he pulled out his phone, called someone, and told her she was being arrested. I couldn't believe it. He was a bloody cop. At this point, the entitled mother was as white as a wall. The bus had just come to a stop, so she decided she'd make a run for it, while other passengers blocked her way. She then also got charged with resisting arrest thanks to this. 3 stops later, a police car was waiting for the entitled mother and her kid. The kid told me he was sorry for his mother's behavior, and I felt really sorry for the kid. He wasn't a bad child, but his mother was a hellspawn. The old gentleman then talked to me and asked me if I wanted to press charges, to which I gladly said yes. Took a statement and thankfully was kind enough to let me solve everything on the phone, so I didn't have to come to the police station for questioning. In the end, the entitled mother got some jail time. I think it was a few months, and some community service. I, in return, got a good story to tell and the sweet taste of instant karma. Right now, I am riding the same bus home as I just got back home from the hospital after a checkup, which reminded me of this. A friend who was sitting next to me told me I should post it here. He, as much as myself, also couldn't believe that such people existed. But it seems I proved it to him. I should also note that the surgery went well. I was declared cancer-free in November, and my hair is slowly returning. Also, I don't need to wear a wig anymore. In 2018, I lived in Southern California while I was finishing up graduate school. Uber was more popular than ever, and given how spread out California is in general, it was an easy side hustle to shuttle people back and forth. However, I only did it for a little while because I'm not really the most patient person and eventually got tired of people's nonsense and attitudes. One of the common tactics for customers looking to screw a driver was to cancel their rides in the middle of the trip to avoid paying the fare. They would often say how they did it accidentally and then ask me if I could just finish the trip since we were basically there anyways. This happened to me 3 times. The first 2 times I pulled over and told them to get out of my car, to which they complied, albeit they called me several names and threatened to kill me. The 3rd time is the subject of this post. It was about 4:30 in the afternoon on a Tuesday when I decided to log on and catch some fares. Most people go into the office on Tuesdays and Thursdays and are looking to get rides home between 4 and 5 p.m. to beat the traffic. At this point, I should mention that I was living in San Diego. If you know the area, you'd know that many people work in the city and live in the outer areas because it's cheaper. On the day of the event, oh yeah, it was an event. I picked up a middle-aged girl who was a student at a local community college downtown. Although she was in community college, I could tell she had money by the way she dressed and where she was going. La Jola. She gets in my car and starts to make a conversation with me. I'm driving through town and As I'm about to get on the highway, I hear the cancellation ding. I pulled over to a parking lot and let her know that she canceled the ride and I could not drive her until she rebooked it. She gave me the "it was an accident" excuse. I told her not a problem and to just rebook the route. Well, at this point, all those people I told you about earlier had just got off of work, and we were in what I would call the power hour of maximum surge pricing. La Jolla is like 25 to 40 minutes from downtown San Diego depending on traffic. I looked and the trip would have cost her $70. She told me that she wasn't going to pay for that. I said fine and I asked that she exit my vehicle. And she refused and told me to take her home like I was her chauffeur. At this point I was pissed. I wouldn't have done it even if she gave me $100 cash. I didn't really need the money. I asked her politely again, and she refused. I had never really gotten to this point before. The other two people were guys, and I would have had no qualms about yanking their butts out by force and beating them in the middle of the highway. However, that wouldn't have been a good look in the situation. I thought about going to the police given we were 3 blocks from the headquarters, but I wanted her to feel the burn. Cue malicious compliance. I asked her if she wanted a free ride, and she suddenly perked up and said, "I knew you'd come around. You're such a nice guy." I said buckle up, but we got on Interstate 5. Here is a part where I tell you that San Diego is 60 miles from the Mexican border. I also keep my passport in my glove compartment because I did volunteer work in Rosarito every so often. We were about 4 minutes into the ride when she asked where we were going. I turned around and told her I'm going to Tijuana, and I'm glad you could join me. I hope you brought your passport. At first, she didn't think I was serious, but by exit 4, she started to panic. I told her she was welcome to get out at any time, but she needed to make a decision soon, because after we passed exit number 1, there was no turning back. I also told her that I wasn't taking her back. Well, she got the message and pleaded for me to pull over. I pulled over and dropped her off at the outlet mall in San Isidro at the border. Just for giggles, I checked the Uber rate from the mall to La Jolla, and the cheapest rate was $87 for a pool ride. I didn't make any money that night, but that was the richest experience I had while being a rideshare driver. I stopped about 1 month later and sold my car. Edit. For those concerned that I was going to kidnap this chick, well, I communicated with both Uber support and a few of my friends to let them know she would not get out of my car after being asked repeatedly prior to driving towards the border. I covered my bases. This isn't my story, but that of an acquaintance that is the son of one of my grandfather's friends. He told me the story a few years ago and I just remembered it. I don't know if it's correct for the sub, but I was advised to post it here. I'm also telling the story as I heard it. For the sake of the story, I will call my acquaintance John. John worked in an airfield in the American Northwest. He gasses up planes, drives large trucks, even mixes fertilizers and chemicals for crop dusting planes. But he used to work in a different airfield a ways away. And his boss is the type of person who skips safety checks, does shoddy repairs, and doesn't replace anything until the last possible moment in order to save money despite John's warnings. As a result, John told me that many things were not up to par, such as aging equipment that should not have still been in service, improper maintenance on said equipment and the delivery trucks, worn out seat belts and tires on planes that needed swapping out, skipping oil changes, and well, the airfield was completely understaffed, resulting in John working more hours than anyone there. So he was living out of a truck and camper trailer on site. Needless to say, he hated his boss with a passion for all this, and the feeling was mutual. One day, John was forced to drive a semi-truck about 30 or so miles to some other location to make a delivery. He doesn't have a commercial driver's license, but does have some sort of permit that lets him drive the truck for short distances under 50 miles. While on the delivery, he was pulled over by a cop despite the fact that he wasn't doing anything wrong. No speeding or anything. So why this cop pulled him over was a mystery. But when John saw the cop get out of his cruiser, he noted that the man was short, about 5 foot 2 inches short, and he had one of those big round hats highway police wear that looked much too big on him. Now this is where it gets silly, because John can't resist screwing with cops when he gets the chance. As soon as a police officer walked up to the semi, John said, "Sorry officer, you gotta be this tall to ride the big boy truck," which understandably infuriated the man. The officer proceeded to shout at him, and he just calmly sat there taking repeated threats of citations from the man. Then John told him, "Look officer, I know I wasn't speeding. The truck's onboard computer and GPS record every move I made and how fast I was going, so you don't have anything on me. Also, this is a corporate truck in delivery for the next county. You're a highway cop, you can't touch this rig without a warrant or a state trooper present." So that's exactly what the police officer did. He called in a state trooper and an evaluation unit of some sort, which took an hour to arrive. So John got to sit and watch as a state trooper and the evaluation unit took apart and went through the truck with a fine-toothed comb for another 4 hours to try and find any and all possible infractions possible. John didn't care as he wasn't the one in trouble, and every minute he was stuck there was costing his jerk boss more money. When the evaluation was over, the state trooper determined that the truck was not suitable for use on a road, due to a number of mechanical problems and improper maintenance that were not outright noticeable while driving until they dug deep. And the truck would have to be towed. Again, John didn't care as he just took a cab home. But the evaluation of the truck sparked an investigation into the airfield where John worked. Needless to say, the fines from the semi-truck alone were astronomical. John's boss not only had to pay to have the truck returned, but also fully made up to code, which meant a borderline overhaul. This, coupled with all the other things that were cited by police through the airfield, totaled up fines over $140,000. And those were only the fines. There was still the cost of getting all the trucks and planes up to code, which if I remember correctly, John stated cost over $100,000. Then there was also the need for new equipment to replace what was deemed unusable in this investigation. All told, John cost his boss nearly $300,000 by sitting back and letting the police do their thing. John's boss couldn't legally fire him because he didn't really do anything wrong apart from annoying a cop, nor did he intentionally rat him out. So instead, he transferred him to another airfield about 100 miles away. And John hasn't had to deal with that jerk boss in person since, though he was still living out of a camper trailer on site back then. Not my story, but that of a friend who authorized me to post it here when I asked him. For starters, my friend owns a blue 05 Dodge Ram 1500. It's not the most reliable model of truck, but he's kept it in good shape and left it looking stock, save for some aftermarket alloy wheels. He tells me he was well the truck from his grandfather when he passed away 7 years ago. Caleb isn't a mechanic, but learned how to do a lot of work on this truck himself. I even helped him redo the undercoating on it and buff polish the paint. This story takes place around 3 years ago. My friend tells me this was really the one and only time he's dealt with an entitled parent. He described her as looking like a teapot, short and stout. So from this point on, the entitled mother will be referred to as Teapot. For the sake of giving him a name, my friend in this story will be referred to as Caleb. Rewind 3 years and our story begins at a local supermarket whose name rhymes with Stolmart. Caleb always goes out of his way to try and get as close to a parking space of the store as possible. And on this day he managed to do so. He went in and did the bulk of his food shopping for the next couple of weeks and everything seemed fine. But of course now comes the intercaring part of the story. Caleb was pushing his cart out when he saw an older woman trying to force open the rear door of the canopy on his truck. which is odd because you could clearly see inside that he didn't really have anything of value in it other than a few tools. She didn't seem to notice him until he was super close and said to her, "Excuse me, what are you doing?" Teapot jumped back like lightning struck, but then quickly started playing the little old lady card. Though this woman was about 50 tops, she put her hand over her heart and said in an over-exaggerated way, "Oh dear, you shouldn't sneak up on people like that. You shouldn't sneak up on people like that, young man." "Yeah, sure. What are you doing?" I was just trying to get in my truck. I locked my keys inside by mistake and cannot get in." "Lady, that's not your truck." "Yes, it is. I just got it last year." "Oh, really? Then what model year is it?" "It's, 2010. Just look at how clean and new it looks." "No, lady, it's an '05. I know this because it's my truck." Caleb then produced the keys and pressed the button on the fob to unlock the door. He said Teapot first went white, then red with anger. It's pretty much full stereotypical Karen after this. "Listen here, you little jerk. You don't deserve a truck this nice. It would be a lot better for someone like my son. He's a local college student, you know, and he needs a nice shiny vehicle like this to get around in." "Are you loopy, lady? My truck isn't for sale, and even if it was, how much would you give me for it?" Teapot started to look smug and pulled a checkbook from her purse. "I can give you $1,500 for it right now." Caleb face-palmed so hard, he said he hurt his nose. "Lady, my truck is worth several times that. I personally kept up with its maintenance for several years. There is no way I'd take $1,500 for it. Plus, there is no way I'd hand over the title unless I was paid with cash. I don't trust checks." Teapot moved to get up in his face, which was funny because he was a full foot taller than her. She was about to speak when Caleb silenced her with a loud, "Don't even think about it, lady. My truck isn't yours for the taking. It'll never be. Now leave me alone so I can unload my groceries in peace and go home." He then did his best to try and ignore Teapot as she began screaming and saying she'd call the police. Caleb then just yelled back, "Call them then." And she actually did. She pulled out an old flip phone and began fake crying while speaking with the person on the other end. Caleb finished loading his groceries and locked the truck because he wasn't about to drive off with the police on their way. When the police arrived, Teapot actually flopped down onto the ground and started fake crying like a baby while flailing her arms and legs around and pointing at Caleb, screaming, "He knocked me to the ground and stole my truck. And then he said he'd come back later and hurt my family. Arrest him now." The two police officers that had shown up were an older man with a mustache and a younger one that Caleb said he guessed was a rookie, because the younger cop was immediately getting ready to aim his taser when the older one stopped him so they could assess the situation first. Caleb raised both hands and calmly stated that nothing Teapot said was true, and that she's been harassing him since he caught her trying to break into his truck. Teapot, while still having a tantrum on the ground, yelled, "He's lying! Arrest him!" The rookie officer spoke with Teapot while the mustached one spoke with Caleb. Since he was so close to the store, Caleb stated that he bet that the security cameras picked up the whole thing. It was at this point that Teapot gave up on her act and started screaming like a banshee while running at Caleb with a small pocket knife she pulled from her purse. Caleb tried to back away and held his hands up, and the knife went right through his left palm, which he described to me as one of the most painful things he'd ever felt. She pulled the knife out and tried to stab him again when the rookie tackled her to the ground and tased her. Teapot flailed around and started screaming and sobbing like a baby. When she finally stopped moving, the mustached officer cuffed her while the rookie called for an ambulance. Teapot was loaded into the police cruiser kicking and screaming, "Help! Police brutality! Someone help me!" Caleb was taken to the hospital to tend to the stab wound in his hand. Turns out he was incredibly lucky as the knife had gone right between the bones and not damaged any tendons. Later in court, Teapot actually tried to plead not guilty, but the evidence against her was overwhelming and, well, she was charged with attempted murder, attempted grand theft auto, and a few other things. The judge sentenced her to be put in a mental facility because she clearly was not well. As soon as that happened, Teapot flipped out and began trying to charge at the judge, but she was quickly grabbed by the guards and hauled out of the courtroom. Also, during the trial, Caleb met Teapot's son. Turns out he got no contact with her as soon as he was old enough to move out because she was the most controlling and overbearing mother you could imagine. Ever since then, she's been trying to show up at his apartment and bring him nice things he suspected she'd stolen just to try and get him to talk to her. She figured Caleb's truck would have gotten her back in her son's good graces or something. This story is getting written now because Caleb decided to check up on Teapot by searching her name online. She's still at the mental facility and he found out from her son through social media that she looks likely to be staying there for quite some time to come.